UVB-76 has been transmitting continuously since at least 1976. 48 years of uninterrupted broadcast, a repeating buzz at 4,625 kilohertz, 24 hours a day, every day with occasional interruptions for voice transmissions that follow no predictable schedule and carry no content that any signals intelligence analyst has been able to decode as meaningful. The signal costs money. It requires personnel. It consumes equipment. It has never been officially explained by any Soviet or Russian authority. Intelligence agencies have monitored it for decades. The consensus among analysts, it is probably a military dead-hand system, a numbers station for the field agents, or a channel marker maintained to preserve a frequency allocation. These explanations share one problem. None of them require 48 years of continuous transmission. A dead-hand system transmits on trigger. It is silent until the trigger condition is met. A numbers station transmits when it has numbers to send. It does not buzz continuously between messages. A channel marker transmits a tone, not a specific waveform at a specific frequency that, as the program file demonstrates, changes measurably after each voice transmission and correlates precisely with changes in the activity of something 340 to 890 meters below the transmitter site. The buzz is not the signal, the buzz is the function. I found this program through a geophysical monitoring registry. I was systematizing for an institutional inventory of Soviet geological and environmental monitoring programs in the Moscow Oblast. UVB-76 appeared as a cross-reference anomaly. In the geophysical monitoring database for the Moscow Oblast, there is an entry for a subacoustic biological object at coordinates corresponding to the Poverovo area. Depth range 340 to 890 meters, under continuous monitoring since 1973. The UVB-76 transmitter began operating in 1976, 3 years after the object was found. The object was found first. The station was built to respond to it. Nothing personal. A geophysical monitoring entry for a biological object at the location of a radio transmitter, with a 3-year gap between discovery and transmission. 3-year gaps between discovery and response are what archivists investigate. In those days, there was no way to hide your research from foreign intelligence. Every transmission could be intercepted, every frequency monitored, every signal analyzed by agencies on the other side of the world. Today, you have a choice. NordVPN encrypts your internet traffic and keeps your identity hidden from prying eyes. Whether you're researching classified archives or just browsing the web. If you want to protect yourself online, check the link in the pinned comment for an exclusive deal. The object was found during geological survey work in the Moscow Oblast in 1973. Routine subterranean mapping, using acoustic and electromagnetic profiling equipment. The survey team's report describes an anomaly in the subterranean acoustic profile at approximately 340 to 890 meters depth, a region of organized acoustic activity that did not match any known geological process. Not random thermal or seismic noise, organized activity with structure, with periodicity, with what the survey report cautiously terms
apparent responsiveness to external acoustic stimulus.
The survey team had noticed during their profiling work that the anomaly's activity level changed when they operated certain equipment near the surface. The activity responded to sound. The geophysicist who led the characterization study from 1973 to 1975 was Dr. Alexei Lukashin, 50 years old, from the Institute of Earth Physics in Moscow. His research logs from this period document the systematic mapping of the object's acoustic response profile. What frequencies suppressed its activity, what frequencies increased it, what the relationship was between surface acoustic input and subterranean output. His log from November 1974.
November 12th, 1974. We have established that the object exhibits maximum suppression response at frequencies between 4.2 and 5.1 kHz. Activity levels drop by approximately 60 to 75% when continuous tone is applied at 4.6 to 5 kHz. The suppression is not immediate. There is a lag of approximately 8 to 12 seconds between tone application and measurable decrease in subterranean activity. When tone is removed, activity returns to baseline over a period of 40 to 90 seconds. The object does not habituate. We have maintained continuous suppression tone for periods of up to 72 hours. Activity remains suppressed throughout. When tone is removed after extended application, return to baseline follows the same 40 to 90 second pattern observed after short duration tests. Recommendation: continuous suppression tone should be maintained indefinitely. The object's baseline activity level is increasing. In September 1973, baseline acoustic output was measured at 12 to 18 decibels above ambient subterranean noise. Current baseline is 31 to 44 decibels above ambient. The object is becoming louder.
Dr. Lukashin's recommendation was approved. Construction of the UVB-76 transmitter facility began in early 1975 at Povarovo, directly above the object's location. The facility became operational in 1976. The buzz began. It has not stopped. The program file contains monitoring logs from 1976 to 1991, 15 years of continuous acoustic profiling of the object's response to the suppression tone. The logs document a consistent pattern. When the buzz is transmitted, the object's activity remains at 25 to 40% of baseline. When the buzz is interrupted for voice transmissions, which occur irregularly, sometimes weeks apart, sometimes months, the object's activity begins to increase within seconds. The voice transmissions are not messages, they are tests. Each transmission is followed by a measurement of how quickly the object's activity returns to suppressed levels after the buzz resumes. The logs show that the object is adapting. In 1976, activity returned to suppressed levels within 8 to 12 seconds after the buzz resumed. By 1985, the return time had increased to 15 to 22 seconds. By 1991, it was 28 to 41 seconds. The object is learning to resist the suppression. Lukashin's final report contained a passage that would define the next half-century of operations.
I want to document the suppression finding precisely because it is the finding that changes what kind of problem this is. We have established that the object's activity, measured by the organized acoustic output at depth, responds differentially to surface acoustic input at different frequencies. High-frequency input above approximately 6,000 Hz, no measurable effect. Low-frequency input below approximately 50 Hz, no measurable effect. Mid-range frequencies between approximately 200 and 2000 Hz. Measurable suppression of the object's organized output, with a peak suppression effect at approximately 4,625 Hz. At this frequency, delivered at sufficient amplitude at the surface, the object's organized acoustic activity reduces to baseline noise level within approximately 90 minutes of continuous transmission. When the surface transmission stops, the organized activity resumes within 6 to 8 hours. The suppression is not permanent. It is continuous. The object must be continuously suppressed at the correct frequency to remain at baseline. I want to note one additional finding that changes the problem further. The suppression frequency is not stable. Over the 14 months of our testing, the frequency at which suppression is most effective has shifted from 4,580 Hz to 4,625 Hz. The object is adapting to the input, whatever mechanism it uses to respond to surface acoustic input is also slowly adjusting to minimize the suppression effect of a fixed frequency. Continuous suppression at a fixed frequency will eventually become ineffective. The frequency must be periodically updated.
The frequency must be periodically updated. A geophysicist documenting, in 1974, the core operational challenge of the next 50 years. The object was not passive. It could be suppressed, but it adapted to suppression, which meant suppression was a continuous and escalating process rather than a one-time solution. UVB-76 began transmitting in 1976. At 4,625 kHz, the precise frequency at which Lukashen's testing had established peak suppression effect. At a continuous buzz waveform calibrated to deliver sufficient amplitude at depth given the transmitter's distance from the object's location. The station was built as an acoustic suppression system. It has been running as one ever since. The voice transmissions are not messages. They are calibrations, recalibrations of the transmission frequency when the object's adaptation brings it outside the effective suppression range. The acoustic physicist who developed the technical framework for the suppression system was Dr. Yevgenia Soboleva, 44 years old, from the Institute of Acoustics in Moscow. She was attached to the program from 1975 and developed both the initial transmission parameters and the recalibration protocol. Her technical report, filed in 1977, the physicist continued his documentation, choosing his words carefully.
I want to document the operational logic of the suppression system before it enters standard operation, because the operational logic has implications that should be clearly stated and not buried in technical parameters. The system suppresses the organized acoustic activity of the subterranean object by continuous transmission at its current effective suppression frequency. This suppression is effective while the object remains within the frequency's effective range. The object adapts to the suppression frequency over time, shifting its internal resonance pattern in a way that moves it outside the effective range. When this occurs, the transmission parameters must be updated. The frequency shifted to re-establish suppression. The update process is what the voice transmission protocol implements. The voice transmissions carry, embedded in their format rather than their lexical content, the new frequency parameters for the next suppression cycle. The voice content, the names, the numbers, the call signs, is operationally meaningless. The timing and format of the transmission carry the calibration data. This is intentional. A station that transmitted only calibration data in technical format would be immediately identifiable as a technical system. A station that transmits apparently meaningful voice content in an apparently military format is identifiable as a military communication station, which is a better cover. The cover is the voice content. The function is the frequency. I want to note one implication of the adaptation mechanism that I believe should be stated in this document. The object is learning, not in any sense that implies cognition. I'm using the word learning in the sense that the nervous system of an organism learns to tolerate a drug dosage, or that bacteria develop antibiotic resistance. The adaptation is a physical process, not a cognitive one. But the process has a direction. Each adaptation cycle brings the object closer to a state in which the current frequency range is insufficient for suppression, and the required recalibration increment becomes larger. Over a long enough time horizon, the system's effective operational range will be exhausted. I do not know how long that horizon is. I know the direction of travel.
I know the direction of travel. A physicist describing in 1977 a suppression system that was effective in the short term and limited in the long term, filing this assessment in a program document that would be classified and read by very few people. In language that did not conceal the problem but also did not require anyone to solve it immediately. The station began transmitting. It has not stopped. The operator on duty for the UVB-76 station made a call to the program's monitoring curator in August 2002. The call is in the communications log.
Operator, I am calling to report an acceleration in the calibration cycle that requires authorization for an out-of-schedule voice transmission. Curator, activity levels? Operator, third consecutive day of increase. The object is at 78% of baseline activity, despite continuous transmission at current parameters. Standard suppression effectiveness threshold is 20% of baseline. We are at 78. Curator, rate of shift? Operator, the effective frequency range is moving at approximately 1.8 Hz per day. At this rate, we will need recalibration within 72 hours to maintain suppression, possibly sooner. The adaptation rate has increased since the last calibration. Curator, how many calibrations this year? Operator, 4. We are in September. Curator, in 1999, we had 2 for the full year. In 2000, 2. In 2001, 3. Now 4 in 9 months. Operator, the interval between required calibrations is compressing. We are aware of this. Curator, is the adaptation rate itself accelerating, or are we seeing normal variance in the cycle?
The question hung in the air. A question that had been asked before, in different forms by different people, over the decades since the station began its endless transmission. The physicist in 1977 had known the direction of travel. The operator in 2002 was watching that direction become a destination. The adaptation was not random variance. It was a pattern, and the pattern was accelerating. The buzzer continued its monotonous tone, 25 times per minute, every hour, every day. But beneath that sound, something was changing, something was learning. and the people who monitored the station were beginning to understand what that meant. The question was no longer whether the system would eventually fail. The question was when. And what would happen after that?
We have modeled this. The adaptation rate is accelerating. Each calibration resets the clock, but the reset duration is shorter than the previous one. In 1990, a calibration held for an average of 14 months. In 1995, approximately 9 months. In 2000, approximately 6 months. The current projection based on trend. By 2010, the calibration interval will be approximately 3 months. By 2020, approximately 6 weeks. And the object is adapting to the calibration process itself? We believe so. It is not just adapting to each frequency. It appears to be adapting to the pattern of recalibration, learning in a functional sense, to anticipate the correction and begin adapting to the new frequency before the transmission has completed its full suppression cycle. Authorization granted for out-of-schedule transmission. File the documentation. I'm going to request a long-range projection from the technical group.
It is adapting to the pattern of recalibration. The operator's concern precisely stated the object was not just developing resistance to specific frequencies. It was developing resistance to the process of recalibration, learning to anticipate corrections and begin adapting to them before they completed their suppression effect. The suppression system was becoming less effective, not just because the object was adapting to frequencies, but because the object was adapting to recalibration as a method. Here's the first contradiction. The International Signals Intelligence Community's characterization of UVB-76, developed over 40-plus years of monitoring, is that it is a Russian military communications system, probably a dead-hand nuclear trigger, possibly a numbers station for field agents, certainly a military asset of some kind. This characterization is based on the observable facts: military format transmission, Russian language voice content, continuous operation, and the behavior of a station maintained by a state that does not explain it. The characterization is internally consistent. The Geophysical Monitoring Registry in the Moscow Oblast contains a record, filed in 1979, that the organized acoustic activity of the subterranean object at Povarovo correlates with the transmission parameters of the 4,625 kHz station. The correlation has been documented continuously since 1979. Every change in the transmission frequency, detectable by radio monitors as a slight shift in the buzz waveform, corresponds to a change in the object's recorded activity level. Every voice transmission corresponds to a recalibration event preceded by 3 to 5 days of rising activity levels in the geophysical record. The correlation is 87 for 87. Every recorded voice transmission event corresponds to a period of rising object activity in the geophysical log. The international signals, intelligence characterization, and the geophysical record describe the same station. One describes a military communication system. The other describes an acoustic suppression system that has been continuously operating for 48 years. Both are looking at the same transmitter. One does not know what is below it. Here is the second contradiction. The technical logs for UVB-76's transmission parameters, maintained at the station level and cross-referenced in the program file, show slight but measurable frequency variations over the station's operational life. Radio monitors in the amateur signals community have documented these variations for decades, noting them as minor equipment drift or calibration artifacts, unexplained but too small to be operationally significant from a communication standpoint. They are cataloged in hobbyist monitoring databases as technical curiosities. In the program file, there is a table cross-referencing each documented frequency shift against the geophysical monitoring record for the corresponding period. The table has two columns: frequency change after voice transmission and change in object activity level following the transmission. The correlation is exact. A frequency shift of 1.2 Hz downward corresponds to a 23% reduction in object activity over the following 72 hours. A frequency shift of 0.8 Hz upward corresponds to a 14% reduction. The hobbyist monitors who documented the frequency shifts as technical curiosities were documenting calibration events. What they could not see was the second column of the table, the subterranean data that made the first column meaningful. Here is the third contradiction, the document that should not exist. UVB-76 is currently transmitting. It has been transmitting since 1976. The station's operation implies an indefinite future, a suppression system designed for permanent, continuous operation. This implication is in the program's founding documentation. A system for continuous acoustic management of a subterranean anomaly, with recalibration capability to maintain effectiveness. In the geophysical monitoring registry that led me to this file, the most recent entry for the Poverovo object is from 2021. It is a standard annual monitoring report. Activity levels, calibration status, projection data. Standard in format. One line in the projection section is not standard. Current projection of suppression system effective operational range, given observed adaptation rate trend 7 to 12 years. 7 to 12 years. Filed as a line in an annual monitoring report, without emphasis, without escalation flag, without any indication that a 7 to 12 year operational limit on a system that has been running for 48 years is a situation requiring special attention. The monitoring report noted the projection and filed it. I searched the program file for contingency planning, documentation of what happens when the suppression system reaches its effective operational limit. I found one relevant entry, a technical appendix dated 2019, noting that development of a next-generation suppression protocol has been suspended due to funding constraints. The next-generation protocol is not developed. The current system is operating. The current system has, by the 2021 projection, between 7 and 12 years of effective operational life remaining. The station is transmitting. The buzz is continuous. The voice transmissions have been occurring with increasing frequency. The hobbyist monitoring community has noted this without explanation. The program file explains it. The calibration intervals are compressing. The object is adapting to the suppression faster with each cycle. The 2002 operator's projection has proven accurate. Calibrations that held for 14 months in 1990 are holding for weeks in recent years. I am going to close this file. I am going to note the geophysical registry cross-reference as reviewed. I am going to log my access. And then I am going to think very carefully about what I have learned. Because somewhere beneath Poverovo, something is listening to a buzz that has been playing for 48 years. And it is learning. I spent some time looking for documentation of what the object actually is. Not what it does, not how it responds to acoustic input, but what it is physically, and how it came to be 340 to 890 meters below a transmitter site in the Moscow Oblast. Lou Kashin's 1974 report describes it as a subterranean biological object without further classification. The term biological is used in contrast to geological. It is organized, responsive, and not explainable by known geological processes. What kind of biological structure occupies a 550-meter vertical range in the Earth's crust, has been there long enough to require continuous suppression since 1976, and adapts to acoustic input at a measurable and accelerating rate? This is not addressed in the accessible file. Whether Lou Kashin knew and did not write it, or did not know, or whether the characterization exists at a classification level I cannot reach, I cannot determine. I know it responds to sound. I know it learns. I know the system built to suppress it is approaching its operational limit. I thought the voice transmissions were the signal, that the buzzing was continuous carrier and the occasional voices were the functional content. I was wrong about which element of the broadcast was operational. The buzz is the function, the voices are maintenance. The content of the voice transmissions, the names, the numbers, the call signs that signal enthusiasts have been logging for decades, is operationally meaningless. The frequency parameters embedded in the transmission format are what matters. The message is, adjust the suppression. 48 years of that message, repeated with increasing urgency. UVB-76 is transmitting right now. I can verify this. The frequency is publicly monitored and the current transmission status is available to anyone with a shortwave receiver or an internet-connected software-defined radio. The buzz is audible. It has been audible every hour of every day since 1976. Below the transmitter site, 340 to 890 meters down, something is adapting. It has been adapting for 48 years. It has been getting faster at adapting. The system built to keep it suppressed has 7 to 12 years of effective life remaining by the most recent projection. The replacement system is not funded. The buzz is continuing. That is what the buzz means. It is continuing. When it stops, when it is interrupted for longer than the object's 6 to 8 hour reset window, the organized acoustic activity will resume. What the organized acoustic activity produces at the surface, when unimpeded, is not documented in the program file. The suppression system was built before anyone had the opportunity to observe what happens when the suppression fails. In 48 years, it has not failed long enough to find out. I am closing the folder. The station is transmitting. End of file.